Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I am feeling so much better about 2060. Following Pedro and Ahmad, my millennial status is well insured. I'd like to greet all of you and thank you for being here today. My family, friends, fellow talk presenters. What a wonderful day to be here, in the here and in the now. We're graced and blessed by small blessings and very tender mercies. My story starts simply enough. I was born. I was born on April 10th, 1954, at 12:45 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon in New Orleans, Louisiana. Very famous city. If any of you don't know where this place is, see me in the breakout session. I'll tell you all about it. You're warmly welcomed and invited. In the West African tradition of naming children, on the day and the week that they were born and the order of their birth, I'm called Mélisande. How I came to have this name is a different story for another day. But please feel free to call me Mélisande, firstborn daughter on Saturday. It suits me well. A few weeks after I was born, May 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a decision that would come to be known as the Brown versus Board of Education decision. This decision by the Supreme Court effectively struck down all of the Jim Crow laws and bad legislation and laws of the Plessy versus Ferguson decision of 1896, which ushered in many, many years of terrorism, murder, and disenfranchisement in the name and guise of self-proclaimed white supremacy. It was a very, very difficult time. I forgot everything. I'm not gonna lie. I did. So I'm going to take my glasses off. So my mother was holding me in her arms when she heard of this decision. And she held me, a newly minted mom held her newborn baby me very close, because she knew in that moment that my worldview would be so much different from hers. My mother said a prayer for me, and all the babies like me. Things would be different. Today, I am a rising first-year student at Georgetown University. I join familial traditions of many people all over the world who send their eligible children to be educated at universities, colleges, and institutions from which they themselves matriculated. And upon completion of their education, pledge their finances, their physical support, their moral support, and their dedication to these universities, oftentimes through many, many generations. I went to legacy schools and went through legacy schools in New Orleans, Louisiana. My great-grandaunt was the principal of McDonough No. 6, which was the school I attended in elementary school. So this is me at the convocation a few weeks ago, 2 months ago, when I first arrived here. And I was very, very honored to be asked by the university to accept the college banner at this year's convocation. It was an honor. It remains an honor. It's very important to me and very important to all of us and to the extended Georgetown Descendants Association. So, getting back to my legacy schools. My aunt, my great aunt, was the principal at McDonough No. 6, which was the elementary school that I attended. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to a neighborhood school 3 blocks from home. I walked to school, my mom, my parents, we walked. It was very safe, it was very secure. I thrived and did really well in my little school close in my neighborhood. We were very, very busy learning to read, to write, being creatively stimulated, and we had recess. It was very important. Going out to the playground, teacher ringing the bell. We were also children who grew up with President Kennedy's physical fitness program. It was the Cold War. Everybody maybe was going to go to the Olympics one day and beat the Russians. While we were in school, we also had civil defense drills, which sort of went along with your physical education. Because the civil defense drill strategy, that was you, as quickly as you can, you go under your desk. Now I have to say that I was never quite comfortable with the under-table strategy of avoiding nuclear annihilation. How? Okay. So that wasn't so good for me, but I managed. We made it through. Across town from me, however, there was a little girl in New Orleans who lived a very, very different first grade year than mine. Her name was Ruby Bridges, and she was escorted every day into school. Ruby was escorted every day into school by United States federal marshals because she was the first little girl to integrate a white school. I went to a segregated black school, a Negro school. Ruby walked the gauntlet every day going to class, past angry white women who hurled epithets daily at a small brown girl while they kept their children, their precious progeny, close to their sides, out of school, and they planned the next boat, plane, car ride out of the city if they were going to be forced to have their precious children go to school with me. Us going to school and learning together. What kind of people do that? Hurl epithets at a small girl because she's going to school with your child. 6 years later, I think I got to go back. 6 years later, after having this wonderful bucolic school year, 6 years of school for myself, members of my class, through the laws that were coming into being at the time, I had to go to integrate a school in my neighborhood. It had always been a white school, and we had always gone to McDonough number 6, which was a black school, and I did not want to go to that school. That summer was an intense summer of indoctrination, education, more strenuous discipline by my parents, as they taught me and made sure that I became aware of negative words and ugly slurs and horrible things that people will say to one another. I didn't understand it at the time. It was difficult. It was hard. I wanted to go outside and play with my friends and go on vacation like we always did and have this wonderful summer, and the fall go to school with my friends. Instead, I realize now, all of these years later, that my parents were preparing me to be a young soldier in very hostile territory. And hostile territory it was. Teachers, classmates, neighbors on the walk home from school, the walk to school. Even the neighbors' dogs didn't like us. Dog, person. It wasn't easy, but we survived. We made it. Hostile, difficult, unsure. We made it through. Very important. There was no valid reason that I could see or that I could hear that these families and these children and these mothers didn't want to go to school with me, my mother's child, simply because they were white and I was not. I'm never going to be white. And that's okay. What kind of people do that? Everybody I knew and everybody that I wanted to know loved me. Both of my parents were the respective babies in their families. Now, when you are born, and you are the baby's baby, you got a sweet deal. There was not a home or a table or a family member or a door that I was not welcomed into. And my family would send me out from New Orleans to the north, to the east, to the west. There were relatives all over America, and they all wanted me. It was a good deal. And I thrived and I grew, and I was always going somewhere. But the most important person in my life was my grandmother, Geneva, Ruby, Taylor, Lawless, Smith. Big mama, big grandma, mother, my heart. I spent much time with her, and most of it was in the best friend pocket of our relationship. She told me tales and stories of my family, my great-grandparents, my greater-grandparents, my greatest grandparents, all the way back to Maryland, to this place. Mary Ellen Queen and Abraham Mahoney, born here in Washington, D.C. Isn't that amazing? So today, telling this story, this is not my story. This is her story. And if there were any one thing that I could do today, it would be to change places with my grandmother so that she could be here and she could see all of you. But that's not the case. So I proudly stand here today in front of all of you, telling our American story, which has its roots and its foundation here in Maryland. In 1715, my ancestor of record arrived here in Maryland as a free woman in the company of Thomas Larkin, who then indentured her into servitude. Queen Mary served out the terms of her servitude, and when that was over, she was then enslaved by the Jesuits of Maryland or their agents working on their behalf. That meant for Queen Mary and for her family that all of her generations would be kept enslaved. Her grandchildren, her children, her great-grandchildren. What kind of people craft laws in the 17th century of a colony that forever consigns the children born from the bodies of African women to be slaves in perpetuity for all of their lives, because that was the law. And so my grandmother's children were all kept enslaved. Until 1794, when her grandchildren and some of her great-grandchildren used the courts and sued the Jesuits or their agents in the court of Maryland for their freedom. There are many notable names that are associated with these suits. Edward Queen won his freedom in 1794, very successfully. And today there are free queens all over the world. In 1810, Priscilla Queen and her baby sued in the courts, and their case was denied. There are no records of Priscilla Queen from this 1810 case, except for her attorney of record, who later wrote a poem that we use today very prominently, because you see, my family was here in the light of the rocket's red glare. And perhaps one day, Priscilla and baby walked off with the British. Francis Scott Key, the attorney of record for Priscilla Queen and her child. We know nothing of Priscilla and what happened to her. But we do have records of her kith and her kin, her good friends, her family are named in a bill of sale, brokered in 1834 by the Jesuits of Maryland and Henry Johnson and Dr. Jesse Beatty in Louisiana. This bill of sale comprises a listing of the largest recorded human trafficking incident in the United States of America. People often say, well, there are slaves today. And they are. There are. That doesn't say much about the people who are enslaved, but it says a lot about the people who enslave. I don't think we've learned as much as we should in 200 years. To date, these documents, as I said, comprise the largest single list of people sold by an institution in America. I'm sure there are more, and we are certainly very happy that Georgetown has brought this to the forefront. The sale ensured that I am here today as a legacy student. I've been asked over the course of the past couple of months, how is it that I, at the very, very tender age of 63, remember, 2016 is looking better, 2060 is looking so much better. How I, at the tender age of 63, came to be a student here at Georgetown University. My answer is always the same. 180 years ago, the Jesuits sold my family. They did. And they also sold many other families, family groups. But that sale was for the greater good, because today we have this venerable institution that we call Georgetown University. Georgetown has produced many, many individuals, presidents, pawns, and policymakers. We could have a Bill Clinton, and we can have a Steve Bannon. This is an esteemed institution. The United States has benefited greatly from the sale of these 272 people. And what was private history at this university has moved into public American history. It belongs to all of us now, and there's no walking away from it. We have to have difficult conversations about how the great institutions of America came to be. The sale of 272 people who were my family were the foundational funds used to secure the wealth and the educational wealth of this university. And of course, all of this was done for the greater good. It just wasn't their greater good. Their greater good would come later in the bosom of Jesus. And with me standing here talking to you today.